for that. May I go back one slide, actually, and show you something which is really, from a technical side, extremely important and also points to a keynote speech tomorrow in the morning. If you watch closely, you see that you have kind of an Gaia-X, for that project which is already closed, a Gaia-X branch, because Gaia-X is available, of course, to provide trust for any type of entity, including services, compute for data, and the original data space idea coming from a very centralized identity concept with the IDS connector. So, of course, that is a viable strategy and architecture. Absolutely, I would have done the same at that time, but tomorrow in the morning, we present how the future evolution of that IDS connector, which is the EDC, the Eclipse Data Space Components Framework, how that can be aligned with the Gaia-X side of things, that future projects can have a single, this is a double architecture, so you have double work. So in the future, you would only need one participant agent. That's number one. And speaking all the protocols, etc. And number two is you see the limitations of the technical limitations of data space paradigm, because it's mostly concerned, actually almost exclusively concerned with moving around data assets, maybe streams or whatever, but can you do a rewind command? Not really if you look at the data space protocol. And this is where Gaia-X, of course, provides much more flexibility on the objects and the way how we ensure trust. So yes, data sharing is the beginning, but as you very vividly showed, you need to talk immediately of services like provisioning, etc. Thanks a lot for that. And then I come to the next the presentation, which moves a little bit on the upper level on top of all the different ecosystems. And I hope that everyone, I got the requests from some higher ups, what is that, I don't know whether one or two or both, and I don't understand it. So if you do not understand it, that should of course be a regular expression. And I welcome Daniel from BDVA, who has been participating in both projects, of course, the Database Support Center 1, which closed at the end of March, and Database Support Center 2 project, the continuation, which started, I think, when did it officially start?
1st of May.
1st of May, thank you for that. So, and DSSC 1 is closed, of course, so you will give a background on the technology side, and also what DSSC 2 is going to do maybe a little bit different. So Daniel, the floor is yours. Thanks a lot. Here is the clicker. Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thanks
for that. And after you, there is the break. So if you have any detailed questions, what the DSSC 2 project should do, you should pester Daniel.
Thanks a lot. Good morning, everyone, and thanks, Christoph and Judita, for giving me the chance to present DSSC 1 and 2 here today. My name is Daniel Alonso, and yes, I am the senior technical lead of BDVA, but here, more important, I was involved in DSSC 1 as Christoph, Judita, and others. And in this case, I was part of the technical architecture board of DSSC, okay. So today I'm going to present the main technical results of this project, but as you can imagine, in 20 minutes, it's quite difficult to explain everything. So I will provide a high-level view, and of course you are invited to go to the webpage of the project, where you will find all the details of the blueprint, okay. But also very important, what I'm going to present today is not the result only of the consortium, okay. We have done it in a very collaborative way, with first with all the common open data spaces in Europe, but also with the whole ecosystem composed of experts and stakeholders in the community. So some of you also participated in the expert group, our thematic group. So again, at the end, those results are the result of very collaborative effort, and I wanted also to hand the whole ecosystem about that, okay. I will skip the fact about the project, okay. DSSC is a CSA, Coordination Support Action, that started in October 2022. It lasted for 42 years, and the main objective was to support the deployment of the common open data spaces. But let me start with the most, let's say, appropriate figure for today, because this figure summarizes all the assets that the project has delivered in these 4 years, okay. And this figure is nice because we follow a different approach as the European projects, okay. Here we didn't organize the work around work packages and tasks, but rather around assets. So all the assets have activities around them, the assets have different owners, all the assets connect with each other. As you can see here, the assets that we develop, on top of the figure you can see the general support, so the starter kit, the glossary, but also the design principles. Then in the middle you have the blueprint, which is the key, it is at the core of the technical developments, composed by the co-creation method, the conceptual model, building blocks, and how this building block at the end can materialize into services that can later on be implemented by tools that can be uploaded to our toolbox. And you can also see standards as the way also to define those services. But also on the bottom part of the slide, you can see the whole ecosystem composed of our network of stakeholders and also the maturity model and other aspects. So I have highlighted what I'm going to present today, those assets that, in my opinion, are the most, let's say, technical ones and of more interest for this audience. Okay. So just start from the beginning, very quickly. The glossary, of course, before working together, we have to agree on some terminology, okay, in some terms and concepts. So when we say data spaces, when we say data product, to be sure that all of us are talking about the same story. And this is what the glossary tries to do. Okay, here is a compilation of terms and definitions, and that we have tried also to be aligned as much as possible with European regulation and standards, okay? We also provide some kind of alignment with other terminologies, and at the end of the day, also, we don't want to impose anything, okay? Again, we want to just to collaborate to this clarification of the whole ecosystem. And for instance, I just brought here the definition of data space that we included in the glossary. Interoperable framework based on common governance principles, standards, practices, and enabling services that enables trusted data transaction between participants, okay? Of course, each of you can have a different opinion of the definition of data spaces, but at the end of the day, this is what we come up together as the definition. Also, very important, design principles, okay, which should stay at the inception of the data space, okay. For me, data design principles play the role when you have any doubt, any question about how to implement the data space. If you come to these design principles, probably, if not the answer, you will find the way to go, okay, because at the end of the day, those principles define the main characteristics that data space should have. So let me go very quickly through them, because I think it is worth mentioning each of them. Incentives and synergies focus on the collaborative value, discoverability, availability and accessibility of data, transparency, trust and security, compliance with legal frameworks, ensure participant rights in data sovereignty, participation through inclusivity, environmental sustainability, reusability of data, fit-for-purpose contractual framework, adaptable data space governance framework, quality by design, and finally, ensure data interoperability. Okay, you might think, okay, it's common sense, but at the end of the day, we have to have this common sense as at the core of our activities. But then let's move to the standards, another very important piece of work, because standards provide scalability, interoperability, trust, and finally sustainability. And of course, we did a very exhaustive research in the project, okay, and we contact with all the stakeholders to identify what the standards should be considered for data spaces. And all these standards are compiled in a whole list that you can check in the web page, okay. But when checking all those standards, we also thought about what of them should be considered as the technical foundation for data spaces, what of them are widely adopted and very commonly used. And we came up with these three standards that, of course, many of you already know. The three of them are coming from the World Wide Web Consortium, and let me go through them. So first, ODRL, the standard to define policy, how to use data. The second is verifiable credentials, has to describe and exchange credentials in a secure way. And finally, DCAT, data catalog, how to the metadata model to describe data. So we think that these three standards, for different reasons, should be at the core of the technical aspect of the data space. But of course, those standards can be implemented in different ways with different protocols. And as together with the standards, we also decided that at least these three protocols should be considered to design and implement data spaces. The first one is the data space protocol that, probably, as you know, through the Eclipse work, will very soon become an ISO protocol. This DSP is composed of three parts, okay? the transfer protocol, the catalog protocol, and the contract negotiation. So at the end, this protocol is wide enough to at least to be considered also as foundational for the technical aspect. But also we identify other two protocols to exchange credentials. And as you know, this discussion was a bit controversial at the beginning. We have many discussions in the project whether to include one, two, or both. At the end, we decided to include both protocols to exchange credentials because even though there are some overlapping between them and they are not fully compatible with each other, there are pros and cons, and then we leave up to the designer and to the implementer whether to use one or the other. So those are OpenID for verifiable credentials, and the other one is the Eclipse data space decentralized claims protocol. We have many discussions, and Christophe here can confirm that. Actually, we run very nice workshops how to benchmark both protocols. And again, at the end, we decided to include those and leave up to the designers how to move on. Okay. So once we have standards, we go to the building blocks that again rely on the glossary, the conceptual model, the design principle and standards. Building blocks are the description of functionalities and capabilities clustered together that combined with other building blocks at the end can implement all the functionality of the data spaces. Here I am just showing the technical building blocks because as probably you know, in the project we have also legal, governance and business building blocks, but now we will focus on the technical building blocks. And the technical building blocks in the project are distributed in three pillars, okay? The first one is about interoperability, so data interoperability, that participants in data space understand each other. The second pillar is about data sovereignty and trust, meaning that participants in data space have to trust also each other. And finally, data value creation enablers that address how to create value out of data sharing in the data space. I will go one by one, again, very quickly because we don't have so much time, but for each of the building blocks in the blueprint you will find on the one hand the scope of the building block, so exactly what this building block is covering. Secondly, the capabilities of this building block, so what this building block is supposed to do. Then the specifications, so exactly how you can implement this building block to address those capabilities. And finally, if it is the case, we also presented some examples of implementation. Okay, so starting for the pillar on interoperability, the first building block of this pillar is about data models. And data models are supposed to provide semantic interoperability within the data space, but also between data spaces. Okay. Of course, at the end of the day, data models in a data space depend very much on the domain, depends very much on the use cases and others, so we were not able to propose specific data models, but in this building block you will find guidance to develop your data models, guidance to integrate data models, but also to share data models across the data space. We also divided or at least organized the content around ontologies, application profiles, and finally data schemes that can be also shared in the exchange protocol. And also we highlight the importance of have a vocabulary service to store data models so users can go to this service and find those data models that are used within the data space. The next building block of this pillar is data exchange, okay? And here we are addressing the actual transfer process. And again, similar to the previous one, okay, probably each data space can decide how to implement the protocol to exchange data. But at least here we are also, as I mentioned before, we are recommending to use the data space protocol, the transfer protocol, that is organized around this status machine with different status, because it's a nice way to organize, or at least in the control plane, to organize or to manage the transaction. And then we leave up to the designer how to implement this protocol in a real implementation case. We also provide some piece of advices about how to use REST APIs and other aspects to implement this protocol, but again, at the end, it depends on the data space and also how it is collected in the rulebook, the way to implement exactly this protocol. And finally, provenance and traceability, also very important for different reasons. In our opinion, this is a key building block in the blueprint, because at the end of the day, provenance and traceability provides aspects to be compliant, also to support the business part, but also as a source of trust. So a good methods and good mechanisms to keep in place provenance and traceability also can be seen as a source of trust. In this case, this applies not only to the data transaction per se, so we are not proposing only to share a log of the transaction, but also store information about the different stages also in the control plane. So, okay, for instance, as I mentioned before, the different status in the status machine, but also everything which is happening around the data transaction can be stored for the benefit of this business provenance, business compliance, but also trust aspects. But also at the end of the day, information about provenance is also data. So we are proposing also to use data models to represent data provenance and traceability, and we are also suggesting to use Prov-O as the meta model to describe provenance data. Moving to the second pillar, trust and data sovereignty and trust, and probably here Judita was the lead of this pillar, so Judita, forgive me if what I'm saying is not fully accurate, but also this pillar, as mentioned before, is the one to allow users to trust each other. Okay, so starting from the beginning, identity and attestation management is the building block that basically manage claims that participants in data space can do about their different attributes, attestation to validate those claims, and also how they are represented in verifiable credentials and presentations. Okay. Also in this building block we are addressing different types of attestation to be used along the whole data space, starting by identity, so to verify the identity of the participants. Okay, membership, okay, to what extent they are members of the data space and what rights they have in the data space, and finally also compliance with all the aspects that are collected in the rulebook of the data space. Here we are also suggesting to use those standards that you can see here. Some of them I already mentioned before, verifiable credentials, but also distributed identifiers, but also and also those two standards to exchange credentials. Moving to the part of trust framework, the trust framework basically have to be sure that the rulebook and compliance criteria are in place, okay? And also this building block provides the processes to provide means for validation of the claims and attestation. Also, we also in this building block provide a way to identify and to define sources of trust anchors, but also trust service providers, and also we suggest several standards to address conformity assessment, trusted list, and also automatic compliance verification. Also very important, we also provide some good practices, and of course the Gaia-X trust framework is part also of this list of good practices. And finally, we have also the final building block about access usage policies enforcement, and here we define the way to address who can use data, who can access data, how data can be shared and accessed, and how they can also, what action can be performed on top of this data. Okay, here we are also addressing not only the creation of the policy and validation, but also the enforcement of the policy. We are also proposing ODRL, as mentioned before, to describe policies, and we are also suggesting as a best practice to rely on this policy, administration, information, and the decision and enforcement. Okay. And finally, the last pillar, once we have in place interoperability, we have in place trust, the last pillar is about value creation. So how to generate value out of the data shared in the data space, and this pillar is also organized around these three building blocks. So first, we have the building block about data services and offering description, and here we propose how to define, how to describe at the end the service offering of the data space. The service offering is composed of the data product plus services together with this data product. So here we suggest how to describe those services. And here we propose to use DCAT and DCAT AP as the best way to describe those data and those services. It's true that we identify some limitation on DCAT, more and more with new data representation and new data services coming into the picture. DCAT has some limitation, and this is something that we want to address also in the next phase of the project. But also, we also consider some sectorial metadata because, as mentioned before, we have been in contact with the whole community, all data spaces working in different domains and sectors. Then we move to the catalog and discovery part, which is the first time in the whole blueprint where data providers and potential data user come into contact. Okay, here in the catalog we provide different guidelines, but also, as mentioned before, we suggest to use the catalog protocol part of the DSP to implement at least the high-level part of this protocol. Here also we consider catalog as a capability. So capability can be involved also in the connector of the data space participant, but also the data space can have a global catalog that retrieves all the offers from the different connectors in the data space. So all those aspects are addressed in this building block, and again, you can check it if you need more information. And finally, value creation services, which it is on top of what mentioned before. At the end of the day, this building block address all those services that are developed on top of the pure data transaction to create value out of this data sharing. Okay. Here we are also suggesting how to organize those services, so we are proposing a taxonomy that of course is not imposing, but at least guidelines to follow. Also kind of an information model for this type of services, how those services can be defined and can be also what components those services can have. Also how DCAT can be also extended to describe those services, and finally how those services can be managed. Okay. And with that, I am done with the building blocks. As you see, a lot of information, and of course, I encourage you to go to the blueprint, and you will see all the details about the building blocks. But the building blocks are not mapped one-to-one to tools and components. So here, so this is why we introduce the concept of services. So by services, we mean a cluster of capabilities coming from different building blocks, okay, that can be implemented as a single component. And we think this aspect is very important because it means the transition between the building blocks and the real implementations. Okay. Here we have defined 3 types of services that you can see here: value creation services, participant agent services, and facilitating of federation services. So value creation services, as mentioned before, are those that create value out of data sharing. Participant agent are those services that support the joining of the participant in the data space, and federation or facilitation services are those that facilitate the data transaction. So it's very important because at the end of the day, this categorization is the one that we have used to define our toolbox. So here you can see on top the blueprint, the different building blocks, in the middle how these building blocks align into services, just to propose implementation, and finally how those implementation can be part of the toolbox. Here the toolbox is the collection of real implementations, and then it is organized around this type of services. It relies on a self-assessment method, and we have also a nice bunch of tools already in the toolbox. So I encourage all of you, if you are implementers, to check the toolbox and upload your implementation also to this toolbox. Okay. And finally, my last slide about technical aspect is the co-creation method. So the co-creation method also, together with the design principles, guide the designer and the implementer when following different steps to establish a data space. Here you can see the different arrows, the different steps. So at the end of the day, again, together with the design principles, this co-creation method follows so guides the designer through different steps, through different questions that you have to answer before going to the next step. So finally, as the last part of the project, we also produced this research agenda that we call DSSC Forward Looking, and I just extracted some aspects from the technical perspective that I think are interesting for you, and we expect to follow in the next phase of the project. Of course, very much on standards and regulation, also machine interpretable rule books, and everything about machine readable trust as a foundation from cross-data space federation. AI as used at large, but also AI applied to data annotation, interoperability, end-to-end lineage and transparency, advanced development of services, metadata for algorithmic assets, as mentioned before, also overcoming the delimitation of DCAT, Federated catalogs to connect catalogs between different data spaces, and finally convergence between participant services and value-added capabilities. So, as mentioned before, Christoph, we started a new phase of the project last 1st of May. We already had the kickoff meeting in Brussels last week, I think, or 2 weeks ago. We aim to follow basically those guidelines. So focus more on the adoption and impact, contribute to the AI Content Action Plan, very much aligned with the AI factories, data labs, and AI readiness of data, maturity and extension of the building blocks that I presented before, go further into standardization, align with the AI, and finally connect between data spaces. So that was all. I know a lot of information, but I hope I was in time. If you have any doubt, you can contact me now in the break, or you can just send me an email or check the project webpage. Okay. Thanks for your attention, and I'm done.
Thanks for the succinct